So I started with a 10 by 10 canvas and I'm using acrylic white to fill in the grooves and to give a base to the color. I did use too much paint and I will have to scrape some of that off later. I apologize for the shaking. It does settle down throughout the video. You're just going to cover the entire canvas with the white paint. Make sure you've got a good solid coat all throughout, getting it as smooth as possible. Here you can still see the lines. I'm just going to work that out and remove some paint as I go so that I get a nice smooth surface to create my wood grain effect. Now I'm going to start to cover the canvas with the alcohol inks. I started with some on my brush with a small amount of alcohol, just starting to get my base down, and we'll build on top of that. I tried a couple different brushes, and this brush seemed to work the best to get the effect that I was looking for. If your paint is not completely dry, it will cause a great deal of issues when you're trying to apply your alcohol inks. The alcohol inks that I'm using are the Tim Holtz alcohol inks, and they are the colors Caramel, Ginger, and Latte. I applied the alcohol ink to the brush instead of the canvas. I seem to get a better effect that way. I did a try later in the video to apply to the canvas and had to work a little bit more to get it to blend as well. You want to keep all your brush strokes going in the same direction. That way you get that wood grain effect. And then you want to make sure that you're reapplying and overlapping so that you're creating those darker areas with the lighter areas. And it doesn't need to be perfect. Wood is not perfect. Imperfections is really what makes it a good deal. Try to keep nice even strokes. You can see in areas where I didn't, you'll see brush marks. Now that I've gotten the entire canvas covered, I'm going to go back in and I'm going to start layering. And I had some issues in the area I'm working right now because the paint was not completely dry, so that caused some issues. So completely dry paint makes a big difference. And then you can see where I dripped on. I had to work a little bit more to get it blended through. And then also I decided I didn't like that one color. It had a little more green in it than I wanted in the canvas, so I put the lid on that. And then I'm just going to keep building this, and I will go back in and start creating knots. working on creating some more lines. I'm trying some different brush techniques just to get different effects in the wood. Normally when you're doing the wood grain on a cup, that you would take the alcohol and kind of move it around. That causes the paint to come up. So I had to try some different ways to get this to work. So I just kept, my ink is leaking everywhere. I just tried to work and get it a little bit solid. The area I'm working on now is where that paint was still a little bit wet, and you can see it's kind of got a different tone, so I'm just kind of try and blend that in and then clean up some of the ink that leaked out everywhere. Here I am working to kind of create a knot in the wood. Getting a good amount of ink on your brush, you can kind of move it around and create the shape that you're wanting. And then I'm going to add a little bit more ink to my brush to continue making kind of lines to get the lines in a knot. You just have to be really careful and not let your brush be too wet with the alcohol ink. You kind of got to let it sit for a moment before you get in there, otherwise it will pull up the surrounding ink as well as cause some issues like I did there. And then you got to kind of feather it back in. It took a little bit to kind of work with it, let stuff cool, try some different brushes, not cool but dry. Let the ink dry on your brush a little bit before you go straight in. It might have been better if I used a spray paint instead of an acrylic paint. That might have been where I messed up, but this was my trial, and so I'm sharing it with you. The brush that I'm using here to kind of get this effect, it is a makeup brush, and so I just kept trying different brushes. Here I went with a little bit smaller brush, trying to clean up those lines and push and move like I normally would on a cup when doing a wood grain effect, but I had a little more trouble with that, so I just had to keep applying ink to the brush tip to get the lines so that it looked like it was a knot in a piece of wood. Basically, it's trial and error. There's no rhyme or reason. It's just kind of the shape that you're wanting to create. The effects of the light and dark will make it look more realistic, and making the shape uneven and not a complete circle or using a template works best. I just played with it for a while until I got some designs that I liked, and I went with that. I'm working on another knot in this area here on the canvas, but because of the lighting, you're not able to see it. I'll turn the canvas in a moment and you'll be able to see what I created. I'm just using the fantail brush here just to give it kind of a soft feathery look and get a little bit of lining in there. Still working on this spot. Every time I add a little bit more ink, the paint underneath of it seems to get remoistened and I'm not getting the color effect that I want. So I'm really working that area and then skipping around just to really kind of make it look like a real piece of wood. That area really bothered me. So now I'm going to work on creating some knots to kind of blend it in around the sides, using again that fine tip brush, adding the ink to it seemed to work the best to get the lines of a knot. I have a tendency to overwork stuff and make it look terrible, so I have really tried to go with a less is more and just be happy with it. So I'm going to leave it the way it is, and next we will be adding our decal. So here I have a 631 vinyl attached to my canvas, and I'm using spray adhesive. I found that if you spray too much or you're too close to the canvas, that it does lighten the alcohol inks underneath, so you do have to be careful. So I'm just working in small areas, applying the spray adhesive, and then I sprinkle the glitter on and then tap off the excess. So I'm making sure to shield the sides so that I don't get spray adhesive over there and get glitter around the edges of the canvas. I'm pressing down on the glitter just to make sure it's a good solid line of glitter. I noticed that there was a couple spaces, but once I pressed it down, I didn't have any problems. I'm covering up the center because I'm going to do that in a different color of glitter, and it just made it faster. I didn't have to be as careful with the glitter. I'm going to continue around with the outside edge, and then I'm going to do the center. Now that I've gotten it all covered, I'm going to spray it all again, and I'm going to do another layer of the glitter just for good coverage, and I wanted it to be nice and full with glitter. Now I'm going to peel off my stencil, and we will see what is underneath. I had to be careful in the center because I didn't want to scrape off any of the glitter, nor did I want to damage the alcohol ink underneath. So I just very carefully peeled up an area to where I could start to peel off that inner stencil. I did peel while the glue was still tacky. That way I'm not pulling any of it up once it's completely dried, and I didn't have any problems with any cracking. After letting it dry overnight, I sprayed with Krylon's varnish to keep the glitter in place and to add shine on top of the wood grain.